The UK isn't a particularly mountainous country. We have no Mont Blancs or Matterhorns, no K2s or Dolomites. In fact, our mountains may be considered merely hills in other countries, but nevertheless, summiting the highest peaks in England, Scotland and Wales has been a bucket list goal of mine for a few years, and in 2021 we gathered a team and set off to summit Ben Nevis, Scafell Pike and Wydffa. On Sunday morning we packed up our rental car and headed off on the 500-mile journey up to Fort William in the Scottish Highlands. I won't bore you with mundane motorway footage, but driving in the Highlands was a different beast entirely. Driving through the Glencoe Valley and the surrounding valleys was a real treat. Before long we were at the campsite. The rain was coming down, so it was all hands on deck to get camp set up. The next morning the views were stunning, but not without ominous foreshadowing. A thick cloud loomed over the hills surrounding Ben Nevis as a sign of things to come. Starting from Glen Nevis we had joined the youth hostel track for a short period, before joining the linear mountain track for the remainder of the walk. Approximately 16 kilometres with an ascent from nearly sea level up to 1,350 metres, this would be the hardest and most grinding walk of the trip as we slogged straight up and straight back down again. Setting off at 8 AM, the weather was dry and the trail was steep. The views were stunning, looking down the valley as the sun attempted to break through the thick cloud, while some cloud lingered closer to the valley floor, adding to the atmosphere. The hike was fairly challenging as it pretty much went straight up with not much give. Just up, up, up again, one foot in front of the other and up. I can't speak for everyone, but my thighs and lungs were burning for nearly the entire walk up. The views over the valley and the nearby scenery was beautiful, but that ominous cloud loomed overhead, and before long we were just completely engulfed in it. Passers-by became shadows before disappearing entirely, and all that could be seen were endless fields of jagged boulders and loose scree. As we neared the top, switchback after switchback, the cairns loomed through the mist, guiding us to the summit like guardsmen in an ancient village on a foggy night. And then we arrived. It was a little anticlimactic due to the lack of view, but nonetheless, we all touched the summit stone with high spirits and damp clothes, before taking shelter amongst the rocks to have some food. As you can see, the views from the summit are fantastic. Energised, we started back down, this time with uncharacteristic and almost alarming pace. What had taken us 4.5 hours up took us 2.5 hours down. Walking back down out of the cloud, we reflected on the walk we'd just done. The ominous boulder landscape cutting through the fog, the views through the valley, the steep climbs over uneven terrain, the rain that was like an omnipotent mist. It was certainly an experience that we won't forget anytime soon. And scene.
And that's your intro.
A strong breeze is going to knock this somewhere.
I really didn't think it would come back to you.
Why would I try and sabotage this game? This glorious game. Oh, I'm doing it because of the glory of the wind. Stuck. One. Last one.
Oh dear.
Well done, all.
How something always do, mate.
Excellent game.
It's the best game.
Good game.
Think
Good
you
game.
don't care.
The next day we packed up camp and jumped in the car to head south, stopping for some of the sights along the way before heading to our next stop. Seathwaite, a tiny village nestled deep in the fells of the Lake District, which would act as base camp for the tallest peak in England, Scafell Pike. And what glory awaited us! Bright blue skies and warm sunshine across the fells. We nestled ourselves into a corner by a river and took a stroll to check out the waterfall and loosen our tight and tired leg muscles. That night, a campfire and some stargazing. Bliss. After a clear night, we were presented with another beautiful scene. The sun rising gently over the eastern fells, lighting up tips and ridges gold and giving the clouds a peach and orange hue. It was a stark contrast to the weather we'd had in Scotland a few days prior.
Morning. So we are just preparing to leave our campsite at Seathwaite for Scafell Pike. Amazing views this morning. Caught some photos of the stars last night. It's very pretty. Really looking forward to this one. The calves are still hurting a little bit, but it feels like today might be the best one, and I'm here for it.
We began our walk from Seathwaite, heading up the river to Stockley Bridge and taking a sharp right up towards Styhead Tarn before joining the corridor route across the fells and up to the summit of Scafell Pike at 978 metres. Descending off the eastern face and winding our way back past Sprinkling Tarn, and then retracing our steps back past Styhead Tarn and back to Seathwaite. And what a walk it was. The weather was absolutely gorgeous, and we were fortunate enough to have the fells keeping us in shade as we climbed past Styhead Tarn and for most of the corridor route.
Well, I can safely say that I was right, and this is definitely better than Ben Nevis. Mainly because of the view. Check that out.
The views over the fells were beautiful, and again a pleasant change from the ominous white fog in Scotland. Gorges, rivers, cliff faces and distant fells, lakes on the horizon and the sea to the west. It really was a fantastic walk, made even more so by the community and spirit of the shared endeavour. Back at camp, we spent some time by the river, soaking and relaxing and basking in the joy of the walk we'd just completed. The beauty and accessibility of the Lake District is what keeps it a very special place in my heart, and sharing these moments with friends is just such a treat. The final summit lies in Wales. Its native name is Wydffa, which apparently means grave, previously referred to by its incorrect English name Snowdon. High in the hills of the stunning Snowdonia National Park is the summit of 1,085 metres. It is by far the easier of the three peaks. There's actually a train that takes you up and down if you don't fancy the effort. Our campsite was a little further away this time, but not by much, and what a campsite. Nestled just the other side of Wydffa in a beautiful valley alongside a lake, Llyn Gwynant campsite was an absolute treat, and more importantly, it hadn't started raining yet. After setting up camp, Dan and I swam out to one of the cliffs, with Kerry accompanying us by paddleboard. We mustered up the courage to jump off into the lake. I can't say that swimming that distance was a good idea considering the climbs we'd done, but I just can't say no to jumping off stuff. The next morning, the rain came. We all laid awake in our tents, listening to the raindrops hammering above us and willed it to stop. We stirred and arose, and through sheer willpower and determination cleared camp and got in the car, knowing in just a few hours we'd be at the top of Wydffa. The route is a simple and charming loop walk, heading up the pig track to the main ridge and descending via the steep miners route and following the lakes along their edge back to the car park. The pig track climbed up and across the hill, and I was admittedly a little surprised at the beauty of this walk. It had a bit more variation than Ben Nevis, and when the mist cleared and you could see the surroundings, it was quite dramatic. I wouldn't say that I struggled, but it was challenging for sure. My leg muscles were shot and felt the same as they would at the end of a very heavy leg session when you felt you barely had enough strength to climb the stairs out of the gym. Determined, we pressed on, and before long we were at the ridge that follows the railway line up to the summit. Once again we were surrounded by mist and it was raining, but the atmosphere at the top was electric. Everyone at the summit had walked there of their own volition as the train was closed for the day, so there was a tangible air of achievement up in that foggy, rainy mountain top. We cracked open our celebratory cans of overpriced craft beer and sat down to take it in. As we nursed our beers, we took some time to think of the absolute maniacs that had accomplished this feat within 24 hours. It was challenging enough doing it over 5 days. But it wasn't over yet. We still had to climb down. The miners' track, our chosen path, as it would essentially make the walk a loop and take us down quickly so we could enjoy the self-proclaimed leisurely stroll around the two lakes.
You ready to get leisurely, Shaw?
I'm gonna get leisurely. You know what I mean?
That path is mad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
The descent was indeed very steep, but once we got down, the gravel paths around the water's edge were admittedly a welcome and relaxed gradient, and the views again was stunning. Mist low enough to obscure the peaks, but high enough to show just how dramatic they were. The water, a rich combination of blue and teal, the rock faces varied in shades of granite and burnt orange. I can imagine on a bright day it would make for an incredibly beautiful view. As we rounded the last bend and could see the car park, we celebrated. Our pace quickened, but there was also an element of sadness to the sight, as we knew that it was done and our short-lived day-to-day life of worrying only about what to eat and where we were walking was finished. But right then, in that moment, the feeling of achievement of summiting all 3 peaks in England, Wales and Scotland was surprising. It's not the most incredible feat in the world, but it was not without challenge, and it felt really good to have done it. If it's a trip you've been contemplating taking, I'd highly recommend it, and it shows that outside of dreary suburbs and grey town centres, the UK truly does have awesome natural beauty we often take for granted.